A little bit about the feminism in the US during the 60s.
During a conference, the CEA established these sections. Section 1. Women and men shall have equal rights throughout the United States and entities subject to its jurisdiction. Section 2. All persons shall have equal rights and privileges without discrimination. Section 3. Women have the right to make their own reproductive decisions, including the termination of pregnancy. Section 4. Prohibition of discrimination.
Feminism is an individualistic form concentrating on women having the ability to maintain their equality through being responsible for their own actions. The ideology is that women will transform society through their own personal interactions with the opposite sex.
1961, President John Kennedy establishes the President's Commission on the Status of Women and appoints Eleanor Roosevelt as chairwoman. John Kennedy established the Commission on the Statutes that made recommendations for improving hiring practices. Paid maternity. An affordable child care toward promotion of future policies. June 1963, the Equal Pay Act was approved, making it illegal for employers to pay a woman less than a man. In 1963, Betty Friedan published The Feminine Mystic, which describes the dissatisfaction felt by middle-class American housewives with the narrow role imposed on them by society.
In 1964, the EEOC is established to investigate discrimination in employment on the basis of race and sex, and this detected a prohibition against employment discrimination on the basis of race, color, religion, national origin, or sex. In 1965, the Supreme Court strikes down the state law prohibiting the use of contraceptives by married couples.
There was a major triumph in the fight against restrictive labor laws and company regulations on the hours and conditions of women's work, opening many previously male-only jobs to women. In 1966, NOW is founded by a group of feminists, including Betty Friedan. NOW seeks to end sexual discrimination. They condemn the racism that inflicts a double burden of race and sex discrimination. NOW is committed to diversifying their movement, and they continue to fight for equal opportunities.
NOW is committed to fighting discrimination based on sexual orientation. They are committed to educational efforts that combat the adverse effects of homophobia. NOW asserts the right of equal marriage for all. NOW is unique in its approach to the issue of violence against women, within all its forms like domestic violence and sexual assault. NOW advocates for a wide range of economic justice.
In 1967, there was an executive order to cover discrimination based on gender. In 1968, there was an executive order that prohibits sex discrimination by government contractors and requires affirmative action plans for hiring women. In 1968, Equal Rights Amendment had two provisions. Section 1. Equality of rights under the law shall not be denied by the United States or by any states on account of sex. Section 2. The Congress shall have the power to enforce by appropriate legislation the provisions of this article.
In 1969, California becomes the first state to adopt a no-fault divorce law, which allows couples to divorce by mutual consent.
In 1970, the IRA movement stayed loyal to what they believed their place as women was.
They continued to work as housewives and stayed true to the traditional view of women in America.
In 1970, feminine magazines were about saving marriages, raising babies, using the right cosmetics, and so on. When MS appeared, it carried articles about the housewives' movement of truth, the sex in the English language, abortion, and so on.
With the publication of the first edition of Our Bodies, Ourselves, they have inspired the women's health movement. Our Bodies, Ourselves introduced key ideas into the public discourse on women's health. It was originally thought that there was a domestic sphere where women belonged to take care of the house and children. During the 60s, women started to fight for their rights. and creating the first feminine organizations such as NOW, and the starting feminine publications as MS and Our Bodies Ourselves.